Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Authority webinar, brought to you today by Rogers Stirk, Harbour and Partners. My name is Toby Fox, and I'm the Managing Director of 3Fox, the marketing agency for councils. As regular viewers will know, our job is to keep our network of councils and developers and investors and their influencers and advisors connected. And one way we're doing that is through this channel, the Voice of Authority, a platform for councils to discuss their ambitions, their challenges, their influences and issues of urgency. And on that note, next week, we're moving from our usual Thursday slot to Wednesday, the 25th of November at 11 AM, when we're alongside the developer Top Hat to unveil the Barking and Dagenham review into modern methods of construction, including the most comprehensive review of the offsite market to date. And either side of that, our sister channel, 3Fox Presents, is hosting sessions first on Tuesday with Montague Evans on beauty in development, a discussion of one of the most enigmatic aspects of the government's planning white paper. And second, on Thursday with Hertfordshire County Council on issues of diversity as part of its Hertfordshire Forward programme. You can register right now for all of those on 3fox.co.uk. But back to today, and we're considering the future of the Great British Town Hall. So your civic estate is failing, productivity is waning, costs are high while revenues are tight, and customer engagement is disjointed. And then you have a light bulb moment. A new civic centre solves all these problems. You can drive efficiency, you can create flexibility, you can enhance service levels, you can restore civic pride, you can improve safety and modernise your functions. It's a no-brainer. And then along comes COVID and wrecks your plans. Or does it? With me today to look at 4 of the main drivers of town hall refurbishment and redevelopment, I'm super proud to introduce a stellar panel with the experience of every inch of this journey. We've got Ivan Harbour, who's Senior Partner at Rogers Stirk Harbour and Partners, our sponsors today. And we've got Aidan McManus, a Commercial Director for Property and Delivery at the London Borough of Waltham Forest. Shortly, I hope, we'll have Sandra Roebuck, Director of Infrastructure and Capital Delivery at the London Borough of Lambeth. And we've got Andy Starkey, Director at Inner Circle Consulting, as well as Mark Thompson, who's Director at Bespoke Urbanist and Consultant to the London Borough of Harrow. Now, before I hand over the stage to them, viewers, a reminder to make good use of the Q&A function on your screens to line up and vote for questions that you want to put to the panel. We'll be able to oblige you from about 11:45. And we've got a few questions to put to you in turn via the online polling function, which you'll see popping up on your screens occasionally. Thanks in advance for your responses to that. Now then, 4 drivers behind refurbishment and redevelopment of town halls. Ivan, in your work with Hammersmith and Fulham Council, what can you tell us about sort of making the most of the town hall, particularly issues around accessibility and inclusivity and attractiveness?
A lot of the issues with, I guess, the town halls of the early, late 20th century are access, and yet a lot of the spaces that they have are so useful and almost impossible to create in today's market. So making them accessible, making them inclusive is in a way gives them longevity, allows them to imagine them a role way into the future. And I think it's really important not to lose those facilities through thoughts that the problems are just too difficult to deal with.
Do you want to talk us a little bit through your work with Hammersmith and Fulham, Ivan?
Sure, I'm going to share my screen now. So I'm going to take you through, as a case study, work that we're doing with Hammersmith and Fulham, and this is a project that's now on site. And you know, many of you will recognise buildings such as this. I would call it, I guess, to be applied to it, unfashionable, but I think more importantly, although it was opened in 1975, I think ever since its inception, really, you could describe it as the epitome of inaccessibility and foreboding for both staff and visitors alike. You know, seen from King Street, which is Hammersmith's main thoroughfare, that annex loomed over the listed town hall, which was built in 1939, and really reduced its civic presence to zero. There were proposals about 7 years ago by a developer to move the administrative offices away, but to then replace them with a residential building, which of course exploits the pre-existing mass and height. That's another issue about planning, but not part of this subject. That wouldn't have changed the relationship with the main artery of the borough, and probably would have perpetuated it into the future, and actually it would have been lost permanently, because of course that would have been a building that would have been sold. So fortunately for the borough, those proposals did fall through, and with our involvement that continues today, we've been able to reinvigorate the listed town hall to give it back its historic civic presence. And not by moving the offices elsewhere, really importantly, but by embracing them to create an inclusive and accessible, flexible workspace that literally sits across the building's rooftop. Of course, it sounds straightforward, but it required much negotiation with Historic England. But the valuable time spent on that and the collaborative approach with all the stakeholders ultimately led to a planning permission with no objectors and a unanimous cross-party approval. It was the first for a project of that scale in the borough. Consolidating the administrative and civic functions has now, of course, enabled a comprehensive development of the campus with the town hall at its heart. Of course, it has a town square. That's the site of that annex building gone. There are residential terraces, a range of affordable workspaces and retail units that are in super high demand in the borough. And it also includes realistic proposals that go beyond the immediate site to connect and reinvigorate the immediate neighbourhood. Again, important that projects of this scale to think beyond the site. The remote office building, you can see here on the right, which once earmarked for the borough's administrative offices, now realises an income for the borough. The streetscape will be car-free and a recently demolished cinema will be reinstated. And importantly, every aspect, every surface and every space will be ruthlessly inclusive. Under these conditions, the borough entered into a partnership with a housing provider to deliver the whole project in one phase. And together they've been able to deliver 52% of the housing affordably and tenure blind, and of which almost 50% of that will be social rented. Of course, this surpasses the 50% target set by the GLA and is a demonstration to others that the rarely achieved figure is clearly possible. And so the town hall, to enable it to adapt to its extended role, it certainly needed a new focus, and that couldn't be a car park or bin store for sure. And so by covering the outdoor space and installing modern fast lifts, access to all levels will immediately make the old car park the new focus. And at the centre of the building, it's clearly visible as an organising space around which everything revolves, a covered town square perhaps. At 80 years old, a major refurbishment of the many beautiful civic rooms of the original building will make them finally fully inclusive and accessible. I mentioned that earlier. It's almost impossible to imagine creating such civic spaces from scratch within the sort of budgetary constraints we have today. So this newfound accessibility will allow them to prolong their original roles into the future, whilst also making them available as inclusive multifunction spaces for the broader community. All, of course, to make the most of the old town hall. And above, mentioned before, crowning the building to maintain its presence in amongst new, taller surroundings will be those administrative offices. And we've designed those spaces as we would design commercial office space. So they're super flexible and adaptable, really to any form of working environment, and in particular, appropriate for agile working. And finally, really, as a gesture never available before, and to reconnect the town hall to its other key prospect, the river here, there will be a public roof terrace directly served by a locally run canteen that will cap the building. This will be a go-to space that will give everyone an opportunity to enjoy the panorama of the Thames. And probably the most important of all, none of this would have been possible without the vision of the client, nor without a continual co-production that we've been doing with the disabled residents team, and nor without the championing of good design, super important, by the Town Hall Commission. And that's a group of knowledgeable stakeholders that were formed by the leader, Steve Cowan, standing there with his mallet, specifically for this project. And, you know, and we always say this, the best projects are built with a committed client, because they are a key part of the design team.
That's fantastic, Ivan. Thank you very much. I think that the phrase "ruthlessly inclusive" is going to stay with me for a while. We might unpack that a bit later. And I love the idea of a leader's mallet. I'm not sure if that's going to become obligatory.
I think it's a sledgehammer. Actually, it's a big mallet.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to Waltham and Forest and ask Aidan McManus to talk a little bit about balancing the budgetary objectives with community needs in your scheme in Waltham Forest. Aidan, over to you.
Thank you, Toby. Aidan McManus, I'm Commercial Director for Property and Delivery at Waltham Forest. I guess I'm on the hook for transformation of our campus, which is actually in delivery as we speak at the moment. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity in terms of our asset rationalisation, but also we're using the campus as a catalyst for regeneration, economic growth, jobs and commercialisation of our space as well as critically sorely needed affordable housing as well. So it's very much an integrated neighbourhood we're creating here rather than an asset rationalisation piece. So I've been working on this master plan, we've all been working on the master plan at Waltham Forest for 3.5 years. And this is the final master plan. And I guess what we've got is looking at investing back into our heritage. So we've got original town hall itself. It's grade 2 listed, sorely needed of investment, and also our assembly hall as well, which is a kind of cultural event. We've had various kind of big names before, like the Rolling Stones, Pavarotti actually performed there in the past, but it needs to be brought back to life as well. And in essence, in terms of balancing off the actual kind of business case, which we started off with, was basically phase 1, which is the town hall, the assembly hall, and the plaza, so which we're now calling and branding as Fellowship Square, which is part of the William Morris kind of heritage in the borough. Is being, and that all that investment in the order of 50 million is being paid for by residential. So we've got a new civic block as well as part of a development partnership with Countryside as part of phase 2, due to go into planning early next year, along with residential on site, but also residential actually on 5 feeder sites as well. So it's always been a balance between getting a capital neutral scheme as best we possibly can. And I think it's probably fair to say that when we started this project 3.5 years ago, it was only going to be a light refurbishment of the town hall. We've ended up with a full modernisation and restoration project, but we're still balanced through, and it shows actually where the market is in Waltham Forest at the moment. So I guess what our objectives, I think I've covered a lot of those bullet points, but I would actually just point up about opening up the campus to the residents and to the public. It feels very much historically that everyone loves the building, but it feels like you can't go in there, and it's for councillors, it's for people who are visiting the council. And what we're effectively doing is opening up the whole of the campus accessible to the public and to residents, also providing new commercial space, big cultural opportunities as well in and around that new Fellowship Square. So we were last year the first London Borough of Culture as nominated by the GLA. So we're really trying to have cultural-led regeneration as part of this scheme in creating a brand new neighbourhood. So these are the key elements in terms of the integrated approach. We've got a fully refurbished listed town hall. So Toby mentioned about balancing off community and cost. What we've been doing is going through a rigorous change control process and gateway process, both with our political leadership and also the officer leadership as well, as the ambition for the town hall has actually grown over the last 3.5 years, to the point that the CEO is actually chairing our project board. Got a new civic building, rationalisation of 5 feeder sites, all modernised, brand new receptioning. What we had at the moment, previously, was that porter cabins. There was a massive, a planned preventative maintenance bill that we're looking to address, multi-million. Through this project as well, we're providing over 500 new homes, 50% affordable. So that was built into the business case. Civic Square I've mentioned. New commercial spaces, particularly flagged the council chamber, which I think is a point of debate in post-COVID times. It's going to be as much a commercial space as it is a democratic space. So we're looking to relocate our registrars and weddings functions into the town hall, which is currently off-site. New cycling hub, both for staff, but also for the public as well. We've got an award-winning Mini Holland scheme, so we're very much a forerunner of what we've seen in COVID in terms of the pedestrianisation of neighbourhoods. So we're really looking to make the campus an exemplar. Brand new creche, part of our deal with Countryside, and improved public realm as well. So we're on site at the moment, and of course, just as we're about to sign a contract, lockdown happened, actually for both phase 1 and phase 2. So we've been going through a whole process of resetting programme and budget, not significantly. So phase 1, which is the town hall and that plaza and the assembly hall, been pushed back a couple of months, and nothing significant in terms of the overall journey that we've been on, and marginal increase on budget. But you can see we're really starting to open up the town hall. We've been working hand in glove with our conservation officers. Previously, a lot of cellular offices, and we're actually returning the town hall to the intended Hepworth design, which was open plan. And you can also see put in that's the monster water tank for the fountain, which went in a couple of weekends ago. Just a couple of images. This is the reception area. Much like a lot of public buildings, there's historically, there's like you go through barrier upon barrier upon barrier. And this is very much returning the town hall to the community. So this is very much an open space, a flexible space to be used for community events, almost on almost a 24/7 basis. And we're very much looking towards a kind of like boutique hotel feel. So it's very welcoming, but also modernized as well as we go through. Very much concierged as part of the new offer. This is an example where we're returning to the original master plan and the Hepworth design. So this is on the first floor, just outside the council chamber, where the actual original design had an atrium, and we've brought and we've punched that hole in the floor, and that's been completed now. So, and that connects public and also staff, but also gives views up to the clock tower as well. I haven't shown any images of the council chamber. We've been going through a design group actually this week to actually really get the right balance on the council chamber, given how we're all going virtual, but that is going to be really quite a flexible space now. And as I said, it's as much about training, commercialization, weddings, as it is about the democratic process. So this is the view up on the second floor through to the atrium, gives you a feel for some of how we've opened up and actually have the breakout areas here as well. Really sustainable building. We're looking at BREEAM, very good, brand new windows. We are actually using Crittall to actually original manufacturers to put in double glazing, full M&E throughout. Civic Square, it's probably just worth just kind of like rounding off back at the Civic Square. This is about opening up to the whole of local residents, to the public, including the lawns as well, which were, you know, almost like it's a new mini park. This is a multifunctional fountain. It's the same constructors who used who's on Broadgate as well. So think very much along those lines, but also in Granary Square as well. So we're going to have various configurations in terms of the fountain and various events. And we'll be formally launching the Town Hall Phase 1 in July of next year. So I'll hand back to Toby. Thank you.
Aidan, thank you. That's yet another absolutely gorgeous piece of civic architecture for us all to enjoy in the future. And it's really nice to have these projects at different stages of delivery as well. And we're going to move on to another stage of delivery, in a sense, to a completed scheme in Lambeth with Sandra Roebuck. Now, Sandra has managed to iron out the gremlins, the technical gremlins from earlier on, and we're going to throw caution to the wind now, and we're going to run your video for you. So let's see if we can do that without a hitch. Over to you, Annie.
So Muse Developments have been working with the London Borough of Lambeth on the Your New Town Hall project. The key objective of that project was to reduce the number of core office buildings that the council were operating out of from 14 down to 2. The 2 buildings which made up the first phase of the project was the refurbishment of the 55,000 square foot Grade 2 listed town hall. Quite a famous building, well located in the centre of Brixton, opened in 1908. And the idea was to make it a more modern working facility, a lot more access and open to the public to use. The second building was the creation of a brand new 120,000 square foot civic centre, which is modern Grade A office space. Off the back of that, we've also taken 2 sites, one of which was Ivor House, which is a 1930s department store, which had been converted back into office space to be used by the council, which we've now converted back, keeping all the heritage features. We've created 26 apartments and 11,500 square foot of commercial space at the ground floor and basement. And where there was an old office block of Hambrick House, we've built Somerset House and Moreham Place, which are 90 residential units. In total, we've created 120 homes for the people of Lambeth, of which 40% were affordable, which we're really proud of.
So I think we went through a very competitive process to secure our partners, and one of the reasons for that was because when you take multiple sites like this and try and organise them into one programme, it is very complex. And we wanted to ensure that, as well as getting the appropriate commercial response from our partner, we also found partners that firstly understood our values as a local authority, and secondly we could work with to explain those values to the local community as we were progressing. Clearly there have been challenges along the way. To undertake such a significant construction project in the heart of a town centre is not an easy thing, and we also wanted a very professional company that would help guide us through those steps and challenges to achieve the result that we've got. So collaboration has been a really important part of this process that we think could not have been achieved if we had not worked with partners like Muse along the way.
The Your New Town Hall project has had a really positive impact on the community. The refurbished town hall and the new civic has effectively created a new civic campus for not only the employees of the council to use, but also for the residents of the borough, who now have a lot more easy access to the buildings and also the facilities which are available. So in the town hall, for example, we have an assembly hall which can be hired for events. We have a registry office. We also have co-working facilities on the basement. So it's a lot more open and accessible than it used to be. We've also developed 120 new homes, much needed homes for the residents of Lambeth and Brixton, 40% of which are affordable and were brought to the market by Notting Hill Housing. One of the key objectives was to create a legacy in this project. Something, the town hall was built in 1908, it's been here for some time, and it was to enable this building to be used for another 100 years and be a facility and a campus which not only the residents and employees can be proud of, but everyone can be proud of.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed for that, Sandra. And it's really nice to go from CGIs to the real thing as well. But yet another beautiful building, another great piece of heritage for a local community, and a real sense of civic pride that you can see that people would take in that. And that's one of the sort of 3 themes that, to my mind, seem to be developing now, alongside this idea of ruthless inclusivity, both in the planning stages and in the sense of bringing public into the civic campus, so that it's not just for the council, for an elite set of officials, and also building lots of homes. There are lots of new homes that are coming out of this, and of course that's tied in with the idea of capital neutrality and paying for it all. But now we want to look at the sort of wider regeneration and benefits and lessons that you may have learned, Sandra, from your end of this journey. What can you tell us about the history of this scheme and how it's turned out?
Well, so as a project, there were 2 or 3 objectives. One of them was around really changing the way that we were working. So we wanted to have 2 people to 1 desk. We wanted to radically change our actual operation. We had to make some revenue savings in relation to the cost of running our property, and we wanted to take advantage of reusing a lot of other sites. And like others have said this morning, one of the political ambitions was to give the town hall back to the people. But it is more than just a project, Toby, as you said. It was really about kickstarting the regeneration of Brixton and underpinning the economic growth there that has started to happen. We also wanted to show that the council could do it, you know, from just over 5 years from having actually no partner, no planning permission. We've gone from achieving all of those things, closing the town hall for refurbishment, reopening it again. We're back in the civic centre in a matter of just a few years. So we really wanted to give the market confidence that as a local authority, we could actually deliver with them. Our project is actually, there are 3 phases, in fact, of Your New Town Hall project. The first phase is, as you've seen in a video with our partners, Muse. The second phase is the redevelopment of Summer Leighton Road, which is under construction with a new theatre and another 200 new homes, and of itself liberates another site for regeneration purposes. And then the third phase is our Brixton Central project, which will be coming forward looking for partners in the springtime. And within that is a building called International House, which is an old council office that we decided we couldn't use. So we put it to the market for a meanwhile use for a 5-year lease with our partners 3 Space, who have got some amazing Brixton businesses in that building, flourishing and growing and contributing to the local economy. Like others, we had a listed building that needed a lot of care and attention to be given to it. And the regeneration project was one of those ways of delivering that. And as I said, we wanted to give the town hall back to the people. So our overall project actually has 14 other sites attributed to it, delivered by rethinking our corporate operational programme and where people are based in their work. It has delivered us £4.5 million of savings a year that we can reinvest in services and other initiatives. There were about 700 new jobs, we think, created from the project, and we talked about homes. And for the economists among us, the estimate was 60 pence in every pound would be spent locally, also driving the local economy. The social impact of the project has been enormous, actually, in terms of regeneration benefit. You saw in the video the lovely space we've now got for when we're back to some sort of normality for people to come and use, but also our enterprise zone space in the bottom of the town hall. Before we closed the town hall, we had a space created. We moved it out to our meanwhile use, Pop Brixton. We ran the space in Pop Brixton, and now we've brought it back to the town hall. So another really creative aspect of the project was those meanwhile uses that have really generated activity into the economy. And as I said, the wider reuse of the sites that we brought into play, and of course the public realm that we now are able to enjoy. I mean, I will just make a comment on where we are now, perhaps today. We're on the final phase now of Your New Town Hall project, which has been the demolition of Olive Morris House. We're down to the basement, which is the very noisy bit still to come. It's 77 new homes, 40% affordable within the policy context at the time the permission was granted. And I'm pleased to say that we're now relocating the Lambeth Archive into the building. So we're bringing another aspect of heritage into the project. And that of itself then has liberated 2 other opportunity sites. So the regeneration benefits around this have been really enormous, actually, and very kind of far-reaching. We are about to open the Civic Centre again to the public in the new year, we hope, COVID permitting. But it will actually accommodate less people because, of course, like everybody, we started with the ambition of transforming the way we were working, and we've moved into a sort of digital innovative phase, despite my difficulties of getting on the call this morning. We have really achieved that. So I think in terms of the wider benefit, Toby, to wrap up, this project just keeps on generating opportunity and benefit. The construction is complete, but we're seeing new sites coming forward, much more economic activity in the town centre, and a real sort of pleasure and enjoyment of being in that building, which we didn't have before. And then, as I mentioned,
the sites that we were able to liberate through this project have, of course, then been redeveloped for new affordable workspace and affordable housing. So it's a multiple benefit across the borough, and a real recreation of civic pride in the building.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. A really interesting piece to add to the story then of what we can expect for residents and businesses in Waltham Forest, in Hammersmith and Fulham when these projects are complete. But let's go right back to the other end of the journey. And Mark, you've been involved in refurbishment of Bristols' lovely town hall, which we can see behind you. But you're currently consulting to Harrow in London, and Harrow doesn't have the same sort of levels of heritage that it's trying to reclaim from its civic centre. It's a much more modern building, but the focus for you, I think, is much more on the way that the council is operating and what opportunities the refurbishment, redevelopment of the town hall might bring to modernise the functions there.
Yeah, I think it's important that before we commission a design brief for one of these wonderful buildings, we give some thought to what's going to go into it. And this, I like this slide because it's a building. It's an agile operating model in a building. And for me, and I think Ivan would agree with me as well, before he gets the design brief, he would like to see a clearly thought out strategy and approach to the function of the building and how it's going to look. Now, of course, we've got a number of drivers to that. We can look at the operating model through the lens of people who occupy the building. We can look at the operating model through the lens of technology that's available. And we can look, and I'm going to look at it today, through the lens of workspace. And Sue just mentioned about the ratio of 2 to 1. I'm going to talk about some workspace metrics in a minute as well, and how they drive workspace. For me, the design brief is the product of the operating model, given that you might have some constraints from the building like we did at Bristol because it's a listed building, etc., etc. Notwithstanding that, I think it's really important that we understand what it is we're going to do in that building 5 years. And the other theme from the buildings that we've already spoken about, and much the same at Bristol, is the length of time it gets to crystallize and deliver the building is 5 years on. And of course, we've been through this year, already 8-9 months of this year where things have changed, and the impact of that is now quite profound. And we're going to need to build that level of flexibility in. So let's look through the lens of people in a building and what you'd expect to see if you went to speak to the OD or HR director in terms of their approaches to agility and agile working, smarter ways of working, and some of the working styles that we get. And some of those themes might ring familiar to you. I get the general sense now most organizations pre-COVID were around step 2, and they were in this smarter working domain. People had rolled out their laptops. They were able to enjoy some time working from home, better well-being, better work-life balances, and so on. And we can move that up now to agile working. So I think the conversation before COVID was kind around if you went to speak to OD. The big change in OD strategy for me is that if you go and have a look at an OD strategy now, you'll see at the center of it a connected workplace. And that is a real key issue now, the way the technology, the people, the processes all interact. And these things then feed into the design brief, and it makes it so much easier to get a clear, articulate vision for the building that you're going to produce. Let's just have a look at, drill down into workspace. I think for the audience here, that will be quite useful. It wasn't that long ago, the picture on the left, I'm trying to think, 2015, maybe 2016 at Bristol, predominantly desks, relatively structured way to work. If people were able to work for 1 day a week from home, that would be unusual. You'd come in, it would be my space. I would sit there, I would have my locker, and I would go to my tea room and so on and so forth. Naturally, we were moving to the step 2 in terms of smarter working. So lots of the examples we've seen today look to me like they're at that kind of step 2 stage. And certainly for those familiar with the Government Property Agency's design guide, the output of that for the government hubs is a step 2 type smart working solution where you've got half desks, half collaboration space, but it's still in our space. People still talk about zones and people still colonize spaces. I would overlay both of those scenarios with some occupancy analysis and look at how those spaces get used. And it would be typical, and I've done this in a number of organizations, it would be typical if you were getting more than 50% of occupation between step 1 and step 2, that would be good. So in other words, half of your key asset is underutilized for half of the time. Now, that's an unusual situation to have expensive commodities and not fully utilize them. So the journey to agile working was already happened, and certainly if you look across at Google or Sky are some obvious examples where you've got much higher ratios. You've got 4 people to every available work setting because they're only in the office 1 or 2 days a week, and so on and so forth. And you see the picture there shows no desks, so no owned desks. No one colonizes the same space every day. They'll go and enjoy the building, and each day they will go to different parts of the building to use the experience relevant to what they're doing that day, whether it's collaboration, whether it's concentration, whether it's technology, and so on. So for me, agile working was on its way anyway. Interestingly, at Harrow, we had the conversation and they were like, oh, Mark, how do we get to agile working? And I said, well, look, let's be realistic. You're in this kind of step 1 stage with both your people and your organizational development approaches. To get you up to this full agile working, it takes a number of years. The cultural change required to get from people used to, at the bottom there, my space to our space to shared space takes time. And I know at Bristol, it was probably 3 or 4 years before we got from, I would say, step 1 to step 2.5. It takes time to get that. So I wouldn't encourage people on examination of their operating model to say, oh, we must be an agile organization. Let's go to this full step 3 move. I would say, no, look at your operating model. It could be a dispersed model. It could be a consolidated model in terms of your asset base, and take all that into consideration. There is definitely no one size fits all, and what works at Waltham Forest might not work at Hammersmith and Fulham, and so on. So I think that for me, that's really important to get the political and the socioeconomic context of the operating model correct before we go on the journey. In terms of some of the metrics, so what's happening with for me, for new town halls, and given the drive, as you've seen from the other models, is to have a mixed tenure opportunities and economic reinvestment from the resi or the commercial and the other revenue streams, is that the actual core of the town hall is getting smaller. Just look at the metric on space occupancy on square meter. So from 10 square meter per occupant, typically for step 1, down to 6 square meter per occupant for step 3. The metric at Harrow is perfect for that. I'm just going to go flip over to Imperial now. 100,000 square foot it was, it's now around 60,000 square foot. So you can see the demand for space, if it's utilized effectively, has dropped off dramatically. The big question mark for me, and one I'd like to explore, is whilst we can do this relatively straightforward for office space, and we can look at private sector benchmarks, it gets much more challenging for the constitutional space. So for the chamber, for the member spaces, for the dem services spaces, for the other community type spaces, whether that's CAB or a library or whatever, what other facilities that the town hall is able to offer. I think that gets much more challenging. What surprised me at Harrow is we did the scope before COVID, and we looked at the scope after COVID for the resident facing services, and we'd allocated, I know, 12,000 square foot, whatever it was. That's down now to about 2,000 square foot because everything has moved out. It's been dispersed to the community. We have self-service kiosks in the libraries and so on and so forth. So we're not bringing people into the civic centre anymore, and they have got used to the behaviours of going to new places, doing online and so on. So there's a challenge for me about the role of the constitutional space in a new town hall, and I think that will need exploring as we move in, hopefully, to the post C19 world. The question I get asked now is, okay, Mark, that's good, we've got a plan, but what's step 4? In other words, what's going to happen next for us? Again, we can look to the private sector for some benchmarks, but let's just go through some of the issues. For me, on C19, it's quite clear for me that the C19 secure guidelines very soon will be C19 secure regulations, and things like air quality, occupancy levels, other hygiene factors will just become a core part of the workspace offer, and it will be more rigorous in its regulation. So, and already in building control, we're seeing that coming through. So I think people have got to build in some C19 resilience into the future. The technology field is expanding at a rate of knots, and we look at immersive technologies. I quite like the graphic to the bottom right of the two folk talking virtually in that office. I like that office because there's no desks in it, number one, and I like the fact they haven't got grey suits, number two. But if you take that to the idea of engagement with communities or governance, then there's some real potential there. And I think for me, there's still a stigma for some people to go to an institution such as the town hall, the civic centre, the county hall, those grand buildings, and deal with sensitive issues. And for me, I think there's a real opportunity. So at Harrow at the moment, we've included in the brief, there's the diagram there, our initial diagram, the 360-degree bridge, so we can start piloting. We're doing a partnership with BT, and if anybody ever gets the opportunity to go to their workshop over in Suffolk, their 3D workshop, it's brilliant. Please take it up. So for me, planning ahead is now for a new building, assuming you don't have the constraints of a listed building and you're free to, as we are at Harrow, on a new site, is A, get the operating model right, B, take your time about the design brief and give the architects a clear brief ahead, and most importantly, put your mindset 5 years away and think about the sort of technologies and sort of organization you'd want to be so that the building works for you.
That was brilliant, Mark. And that takes us across to Andy now. So we're going to start to have a quick look before we go to sort of Q&A and a discussion.
As other guys have highlighted on this webinar, the pandemic's brought around a real moment of reflection on how public services can be delivered, and the enhancements that we can draw into how we engage with the communities, the inclusivity aspect, using the town halls and town centres as that focus. And whilst the pandemic has put a lens over the workforce flexibility, that in itself is not a new topic, although it has done wonders in removing some of those barriers I think we've seen, and has tested some of those challenges. But we've also seen adaptations in the way public services have been delivered, our approach to inclusivity and bringing the communities around these. But if we just touch on the workforces for a second, studies by CIPFA are showing at the moment that out of most of the asset managers that are reviewed, the council asset managers, most are talking about a reduction in 25 to 50% of their portfolio based on the outcomes, and 28% of those are even talking about significant change up to the value of 75% of reduction in the portfolio. We've also seen tackles with productivity. There's lots of questions raised about productivity, and for years we've been talking about moving away from this culture that oversees people. And 62% of those asset managers at the moment are seeing similar or enhanced levels of productivity pre-COVID. Although it is interesting to note that actually that's reduced from the 80% early on in the COVID days, and I think that's a reflection of the social context, the mental well-being, emotional engagement, and they're becoming far more prevalent factors in the effective and cohesive workplace model. We're seeing pressures on budgets. Rightly, councils focused on frontline services, put money into those areas, couldn't wait for government funding, and so on and so forth. And so there's a huge amount of pressure on the assets at the moment. So how can councils best use their asset stock to develop those solutions and prioritise community and well-being? And how can they make decisive and informed decisions about the role the town hall, whether that be the beautiful town halls we've looked at from Waltham Forest, the Hammersmith, to smaller town halls, and public assets? How can they be used to play a part in promoting local communities and business? What we know is all the old still challenges still remain, but the screws have been tightened in some areas. The promotion of local economic growth, support for local business, pressure on arts and culture, But we are also seeing some new characteristics develop, ever increasing focus on the flexibility of design. It's impossible to understand what's happening in the next 12 to 18 months, let alone 12 to 18 years. And that flexibility that Ivan's spoken about, and the drawing in the community that Aidan's spoken about earlier, I think are fundamental parts of those designs that we've worked with those guys through. We've seen an immediate and successful shift in remote working, but we've also seen, and this is touching on Mark's point, online committees, that civic function being in the web. We've seen the LGA drive a lot of online committees. I think Waltham Forest were the first to have a fully online planning committee, although someone I'm sure will fact check me on that. But we've seen the increase of electronic services. We pre-COVID, there was a shift to engage customer service and the more transactional actions to happen remotely. That's been accelerating. We're seeing a lot of the customer engagements being able to successfully be delivered online. But we're also seeing a growing agenda around connecting the cultural hub and the civic function. So all of those drive the challenge we're still looking at. The mandate for change has increased with a focus on public safety, but as well as that economic growth. And all of these are important factors considering for local authorities. So what is the public value and how do you assess that, the status quo? Well, with so many moving parts, it's important and difficult, I suppose, to narrow down key points to enable rapid and effective decision-making in the strategic delivery and setting those program briefs that Mark touched on earlier. Primarily community impact. How do you understand the indirect analysis of the function that the town hall plays? What's the economic growth that we get out of the town hall from having it in it populated with the footfall drawing down high streets, the shops that serves, and the local businesses that it promotes from having that that in that location. And understanding of that indirect economic assessment is fundamental. It starts that effective decision making. Secondly, your urban assessment and your policy alignment. All this has to be backed by an up-to-date asset review that's closely aligned with your business proposition, setting out your customer support, local jobs targets, economic growth targets, revenue versus capital strategies. All of this must be cohesively aligned to the asset and property strategy if you are going to make effective and clear decisions quickly. I can't see any senior leaders being able to take decisions on the town hall in isolation without thinking of the impact on local community. It's also important to understand the need. So if you are going to engage in a discussion about what other functions could the town hall or public assets drive, how do you understand the need? We worked at Hounslow very quickly, set up a local business survey and engagement strategy that sought to answer just those questions. And very quickly, we got clear information on what the local business needs, those that were being successful, those that were resilient through COVID, and those who were at risk. And therefore, an adaptive strategy can be built about those, how the public assets can support that growth. Staff productivity, we've spoken about, Mark went into good details in those. But yeah, how does that space provide the practical, physical, and mental needs of the staff in the local organisations? But also, it's actually quite quick to now understand. Gone are the days of having people walking around with an iPad or a graph on the use of spaces. It's the online assessments of workplace flexibility and capacity, such as Leesman survey or Think Idea survey, are very, very quick and very effective tools to modelling what that future office need would be. We've spoken about borough pride. Does the town hall represent the very best for the customer and the community? Is it in the right location? Is it inclusive? And we've already touched on that. The importance of those being key design drivers and part of the mandate for Waltham Forest and Hammersmith and Fulham. And I suppose on reflection, the key to all of this is that it's this understanding and this assessment is built off existing and available data. Although we work at Hounslow, we just harvested available data out there. We built a model that now can focus those most valuable data sets and return evidence-based information very, very quickly. As Sandra alluded to, Mark said, the journey across staff productivity and flexible working has been happening for years. So there is readily available data about performance requirements that can align a journey going forward. So if we are going to think about, having established the value of the town hall in place, what are the other aspects that we can think around it in support of growing that local community, engaging the community, supporting the local needs? We've seen a decline in the arts and culture. Could town halls provide a venue for these theatres and cultural activities? often grade 2-star listed in status, often open space. They provide quite a good alignment with those kind of opportunities. Local entrepreneurs need space and platforms. Rents and affordability are becoming a barrier to their success. And again, the local authorities and the asset portfolio that you have can provide and support that growth. Again, engendering Sandra's points around local economic growth and supporting local business. But also, can the town hall support the wellbeing agenda? Can it tackle loneliness? Can there be provision of health clubs, community meetings, getting that playing the function of getting people to coalesce around a space to tackle some of the most important knock-ons that we're seeing from COVID? Or even, could they be used for more commercial opportunities, the very basic revenue generating opportunities instead of the office space to support that financial stability of a local authority? So to do this effectively, I would say it has to align with all the existing strategies. This can't be a knee-jerk reaction to a moment in time. It has to support the existing growth strategies. And whilst they may, now is the time to reflect on exactly the pinpoint precision of those, the overall business plan and the overall strategic direction has to be the starting point. But then you start the business case and strategic decision making. Similarly, to make these implementable in a quick fashion, they've got to align with, identify and align with existing programs and existing projects that can support and piggyback off those. And once you've done the data analysis and looked at the economic growth, the inclusive agenda, what needs the council needs in terms of that provision going forwards, really sets out, you can set yourself on a foundation with a properly understood business case that focuses on current and future problem definition, how data-driven analytics can set the baseline so you can review performance. You'll have evidence-based proposals of the need and the opportunity, and a delivery plan that's integrated with strategic priorities. That therefore, all of that coming together enables very quick, effective decision-making that supports the council and supports the growth and connection of communities going forward. I hope that is clear and helpful. We should move over to
that's absolutely brilliant. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely brilliant. So viewers, you've now got a toolkit for town hall refurbishment and redevelopment. We've given you an idea of some of the great, the grand scale and vision and ambition you can have. Some of these fantastic buildings that are coming through the pipeline. What's actually been delivered. Vast regeneration benefits to the wider community and economic benefits locally, and new homes and the possibility of making all of this capital neutral, even all the way back to the planning stage, the planning phase, and the sorts of factors that need to affect your decision making. All of this will be available to you online, with all of the awkward bits where my internet cuts out and Sandra's audio cuts out, taken out completely. So none of these comments are going to mean anything to our on-demand viewers who get to see the slick production at the end. But thank you very much indeed, panel, for providing so much detail around this story. We've got time for a few questions. I've been sort of ticking through the Q&As as we've been going, and I think you've answered most of them in the course of the presentations. But one that came up, Sandra, I'd like to put to you, and then go around the panel. The decision around choosing a development partner for your redevelopment versus going through, say, self-build. Can you talk us a little bit through why the council didn't do it itself, given the scaling up of development activities that councils are undertaking at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think at the time of the project, which is a few years ago, we didn't really have the skills and resources in-house that we do have now. But it's really all a question of the amount of appetite for risk that you have. All of these projects are all very complex and involve numbers of phases and so on and so forth. So I think when we were making that decision a few years ago, we felt that we did want to share some of the risk with a partner, even if that meant that our partner also benefited from the profit, because I think that's the conversation that happens in local authorities and anywhere at the moment, is if we do it ourselves, will we retain more of the value, shall we say? But I think at the time we felt very much that we wanted to share that risk because it was a huge project. I mean, we're not going to do the Your New Town Hall project again, in the very near future, I would hope. So it was a massive thing to take on. So it's a question of risk. If we were starting it now, I think we might think differently. certainly about some of the phases. I think we have got some of the expertise. We've now got our own housing company. I think some of the phases we could actually decide to deliver ourselves, but it is really, again, as I said, a question of the appetite for risk. When we were going out to procurement, we actually had a range of offers, one of which was to have a kind of agency approach, an intermediary for us, but at the time that didn't give us any certainty over cost. So I think the other big factor for us was we really wanted to be sure that we would get a fixed cost as far as we were able to in the process, because obviously one of the ambitions of the project, as well as all of the benefits that we've all talked about, was to save revenue and to ensure we got a capital receipt from some of the disposal. So that was a very important factor in the choice of delivery agency, if you like.
Yeah, understandably. Andy, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think it's it's always great to understand the local authorities' approach and particularly engaging delivery partners. As Sandra said, the assessment of internal capacity. Bear in mind, these big schemes are on top of all other day jobs. So, and it's not just the property team or the assets teams that are drawn into big schemes like this. So there's a wide consideration of the capacity and capability in-house to deliver. But also, I think it's always fascinating because every organisation I've worked with, there is a different route based on the inputs of what's the commercial values, what the drivers of the council. When we were working through, Aidan touched on originally with Waltham Forest, we started looking at those and how you can make the scheme totally cost effective, and is what's the cost you pay for delivering yourself as opposed to bringing the partners in. Hammersmith and Fulham again setting up JVs because of the nature of both the town hall but then the other parts of the scheme. So the inputs are varied, and I'm always setting out, there can't ever be a one size fits all in the approach to delivery. The right answer is always a bespoke solution that is worth taking the time to figure it out, because it can make significant gains in whichever aspect of your priorities you're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Andy. Johnny Mallinson in our audience is asking if you'll share contact details with the audience so they can get in touch with you and ask you more questions about this. I guess, Johnny, it might be helpful if you put in the chat what the nature of your inquiry is, and that might encourage our panelists to share their contact details with you. Over to you, Ivan. Can you pick up on this? How would you advise your clients in terms of selecting a development partner? And then also there's another thread I'd like you to have a look at, which is how you include the community in the planning phase around the scheme. How inclusive can you be in asking the community what they'd like from the project?
I think in terms of development partners, this is about understanding where your strengths are, and the partnerships are there to ensure that you have the strength across the board for the breadth of the project. As has been mentioned, you can seek advice, you can get professional support, but you can also partner with people who are invested financially in the process. It really is, I think it's already been mentioned, it's a risk question. The one thing that I have to say from our experience is that at the end of the day, as clients, you are the most invested in the future. And of course, being a professional, I would say that having the right professionals on board can help take you through the process. And so I think it's almost, and unfortunately, it is a thing that's becoming progressively and has become progressively less common. That loss of skill set, the fact that being disconnected from housing, for example, for so many years, that lost knowledge, of course, puts you in a position where there's nervousness, but it isn't as complicated as it looks. That I can say. In terms of the conversation and the process, the briefing and briefing. I'm an architect, so briefing an architect. We can get formal briefs, but they are the beginning of the conversation. And I think it's so important that if you're going to have support both during the process and eventually once the project has been realized, there is no alternative but to talk with the representatives of the community who are actively going to participate in this long after we as architectural practitioners have moved on to other things. And the term that I use, the ruthlessly inclusive, actually I was thinking who came up with that. I think it emerged, but probably arose from Steve Cowan originally. But I think it represents something which says, there are many ways of doing things, and all of us as in our business find sort of shortcuts. This says there are no shortcuts. Actually, you have to do things properly. There are no excuses. You have to make sure that when you do consultation, you really do consultation. And I can't tell you the number of meetings that we did in the process with Hammersmith and Fulham, but they were in the hundreds. And you can, and you mustn't stop doing them either. And that process of the conversation about co-production, particularly with the accessibility group, is all about ensuring that you don't get to a point where you say, well, that's it, we've done that. Now we're off somewhere else, and we'll see you in a few years when the project's complete. It's so important that we always say design doesn't finish until the building is built. And therefore, the collaboration, the consultation, the conversations, bringing people along with you shouldn't finish either.
Fantastic, Ivan. Thanks a lot. Aidan, coming to you, I wanted to come back to you and ask you. I was rather disturbed to hear you suggesting that you were bringing Pavarotti back to life at Waltham Forest. So I'm sure that wasn't the meaning that you were trying to get across. But no shortcuts. Would you echo that in terms of the sort of consultation that you've been going through in Waltham Forest? And then if you'd like to pick up on how you've gone about selecting a development partner, why the local authority isn't building itself, and that sort of process of including the local community in your consultations.
So right from conceptual design, master planning, so 3.5 years ago was the first time we consulted. So I'd absolutely support what Ivan said. You've got to bring the community along with the journey. Members got a really important part to play in that, local ward members in particular at Waltham Forest and their ward forums, what we regularly attending. And I think the community had to get used to us actually consulting so early. Yeah. They wanted to ask a lot of detail, and we were saying this is purely conceptual design. And we still haven't put in the planning application 3.5 years later for phase 2 yet. That's going in early next year, but there's no surprises. And what was interesting was actually the approval rating was really high. People absolutely loved the town hall. They loved the fact that we were investing in it. When we did, I did a full launching a conceptual design. It coincided with open house. We had queues around the block to go around the town hall. So absolutely, people supported that principle. We also demonstrated some principles as we've been going through. So opening up the campus, those lawns at the front, they are effectively now parks. And we brought in a local SME, so Perky Blenders, local roastery, actually now supplying Selfridges, but only had one roastery when we actually brought them in. So we've been growing a local business, but they were also running events at weekends and out of office hours on those lawns as well. So suddenly what was seen as sort of like, you cannot go past this fence, actually people were using that as and opening up effectively to council. So demonstrating the principles as you go through the project, I think is really important.
Great, thanks, Aidan. Can I put another point to you as well? Andrea Derner, one of our viewers, is asking about the sort of the cash-strapped nature of local authorities with costly heritage buildings and looking at refurbs and so on. When you talked about capital neutrality, does the way in which you were looking to achieve that, has that changed radically as a result of COVID-19?
In terms of COVID-19, the main impact has been on resetting programme time, but also revisiting budget. But budget, because of the approach we've taken on procurement, so I'll touch on that, because at phase 1, we have done self-build. because of the nature of what we're dealing with. It's historic building, and scope keeps changing, to be frank, because we've had to radically change control of that. But we've taken a particular approach on the self-build that we're doing a staged approach, because we didn't know when we were signing the contract how the pandemic would work out. So we've been kind of like at keys. It's about every 2 to 3 months, we're actually got a stage where we actually revisit budget with ISG, our contractor, on that. And phase 2, we're going for development partner, but that was because we were really clear on scope, really clear on what we wanted, and to be honest, we want a product, whereas the first phase is much more nuanced.
Yeah. But in terms of the way that you're looking to generate revenue from the building itself, you were talking about sort of concert halls and public spaces with cafes and bars and so on. Does that whole revenue projection change now?
It does. I mean, we've got to look very in terms of the property function, we need to look at the complementary use of space, of commercial spaces. So I've mentioned about the relocation of wedding function. So weddings will still happen. And so we're looking to drive a revenue there through basically get married in the council chamber, then you go to the fountain to have your photo opportunity, and then you have your reception in the assembly hall. So we offer a complete package. There is a real desire in COVID for local jobs. And that's really important, the articulation of that. So actually investing in local businesses at a reasonable rent, but also recognise the social value in terms of local jobs that they bring. So that's really the push politically at the moment.
Great stuff. Thanks, Aidan. And Sandra, I think, talked about over 700 jobs being created by the project in Lambeth. Mark, pick up on any of these threads, if you like. We've got a local community consultation at the stage you're at, really, in terms of planning the scheme, and the idea of selecting a partner versus self-build. I mean, is Harrow looking at self-build program and all the resources and capacity issues that might create? And then finally, the economics during COVID-19. Is it possible to self-finance these projects, do you think?
Well, at Harrow, they started off the journey with direct delivery. And I have done both direct delivery and developer-led delivery. I would question whether local authority has the governance structure, the capacity, and most importantly, the resilience to build these big schemes directly. I think the model is, as Sue said, is assume you're going to have a development partner, but as you develop capacity to do parts of the development, that would make sense. So you'd be able to reinvest more revenue into the scheme as a result of that. But in terms of driving, in the case of Harrow, we've just appointed Waits as the development partner. And I think it's right that we rely on their expertise and their balance sheet to get us through this resilience. In terms of C19, if you look at it in terms of space capacity, and if you look at recovering an estate from C19, in other words, it all closes down and opens up again, how many people can use the estate? If you got 25% to 30% of occupancy as a result of C19, you would see the challenge that we've got ahead of ourselves. So look, so 2 meter social distance in a building has a dramatic effect. And the economy of scale of running the building, it doesn't get any cheaper to turn the turn it on and heat the building and so on and so forth. So at the moment at the Civic campus at Harrow, 2,000 people normally, we've got 100 people a day in the building doing essential services. Everybody else is working from home. There is a cost element of that that's probably not going to be sustainable. In terms of what's happening with the new build stuff and what we're scoping up, it's going to be, as I said earlier, it's going to come regulation rather than guidelines, and we're just scoping up now the impact. And one of the models we looked at was sustained 1.5 meter social distancing and people using face masks for sustained. And we thought we could achieve about 75% of occupancy. So there's still a lot of, there is from a building perspective, there's a big shortfall in revenue as a result of C19. If you roll that out to different sectors, and part of our big regen scheme is hospitality and event management offer, and it's dead, we can't get any financing for it because there's no development finance available for hospitality or event new build transactions at the moment. All the transactions we've talked about are things that are historic and have been done. Go to the market now and try and secure funding for hospitality, event management, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
So I think there are some profound conversations coming ahead for new civic halls. And I think there are some difficult conversations for all of the ones that we've looked at, where they're reliant on those mixed tenure revenue streams as the impact of C19 bites.
Great stuff, Mark. I'm gonna let you have the last word there, not because it's great stuff, and there's so many more questions. This is one of my favorite sessions. There are so many more profound questions to ask around constitutional functions and democracy and how we devolve functions out of these buildings. But we've tested our viewers' patience enough. We're at 12:14. I'm very grateful for your patience as well, panel. It's midday. They've got to get to their Zoom calls and their Teams meetings. But before they do that, please join me, viewers, in thanking our stellar panel for all their insight and experience that they've shared today. Thank you, Aidan McManus of London Borough of Waltham Forest, and thank you, Sandra Roebuck from the London Borough of Lambeth. Thank you, Andy Starkey from Inner Circle Consulting, and thank you, Mark Thompson of Bespoke Urbanist and London Borough of Harrow. And of course, thank you, Ivan Harbour of Rogers, Stirk, Harbour and Partners, both for your excellent contribution today to the discussion and your generous sponsorship of today's event. Most of all, viewers, as ever, thank you for again tuning in to grace us with your attention and your stimulating questions. There are loads of them left hanging, and we'll put those to the panel by email and ask them if they can spare the time to address one or two of them, and we'll put those out through the LinkedIn Members Club, and you'll find those responses circulated over coming days. We're going to be back next Tuesday with 3 Fox Presents, and there's going to be a really lively discussion around beauty in development, and on Wednesday to reveal the Barking and Dagenham review into modern methods of construction. You don't want to miss either of those, so register at 3fox.co.uk. If you'd like to get involved in any of these sessions as a sponsor or as a speaker, email me please at toby@3fox.co.uk. Meanwhile, until next week, from our panel, from Rogers, Stirk, Harbour and Partners, from me and from everyone at 3 Fox, good afternoon.